I knew something had shifted the moment my daughter-in-law walked past me in the hallway without a word. Not a glance, not a nod. Just the faint smell of her perfume and the sound of her heels clicking down toward the kitchen that had been mine for 31 years. I stood in the doorway of my own bedroom and listened to her open the refrigerator, move things around, close it again. Then silence. Then the television turned on in the living room, the volume higher than I ever kept it. I was 67 years old, standing in my own house, and I felt like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. My name is Eleanor. I spent 34 years as a registered nurse at Sunnybrook in Toronto, raised my son Daniel in a semi-detached on a quiet street in Scarborough, and buried my husband Gerald 3 years ago last November. Gerald died on a Tuesday. By the following spring, Daniel had asked if he and his wife Renata could move in to help me through it. I said yes. I thought it was kindness. I thought it was family. I should have paid more attention to the way Renata said the word temporary slowly, carefully, like someone measuring out just enough of something. In the beginning, it was fine. More than fine, actually. Daniel brought groceries on Fridays. Renata cooked on weekends. My granddaughter Lily, who was 15 at the time, started sitting with me in the evenings while I watched my programs. We would share a bowl of chips, and she would rest her head on my shoulder and ask me questions about what nursing was like in the 80s. Those evenings felt like a gift. I was not alone in the house anymore, and after Gerald, alone had become something I didn't know how to hold. But things changed slowly. The way things always change when someone is being careful about it. It started with small adjustments. Renata reorganized the kitchen, said she was just making it more functional. My cast iron pan, the one I had used every Sunday for 20 years, ended up in the back of the lowest cupboard. The good cutting board Gerald had bought me at the Street Lawrence Market moved to the garage. I didn't say anything. I told myself it was her way of contributing, of making the space feel shared. Then she brought up the parking spot. Said her car was newer and it made more sense for it to be in the covered spot rather than Daniel's, and that I didn't really drive in winter anymore anyway. That part was true. My night vision had gotten worse, and I was cautious in ice. But I had not said she could have my parking spot. She had simply announced it the way someone announces the weather. I still said nothing. I thought about what Gerald would have said, and then pushed the thought away, because thinking about what Gerald would have said made it too hard to breathe. By the second year, the guest room had become a home office for Renata's consulting work, which as far as I could tell consisted of phone calls that lasted 2 hours and packages arriving every other day from online shops. The dining room table, where Gerald and I had eaten every dinner of our married life, now had Renata's laptop and stacks of folders at one end that were never moved, not even on holidays. We ate in the kitchen. I ate in the kitchen. They often ate later, after I had already cleaned up and gone to sit in my room. I want to be careful here. I want to be honest. Because people sometimes ask how a person lets these things happen, how a mother doesn't simply say, stop. And the answer is complicated in a way I didn't fully understand until after. When Gerald died, something went quiet in me. Not grief exactly, I knew grief. I had held the hands of dying patients for 30 years. I understood grief as a process with a shape. What went quiet was different. It was something closer to confidence, to the certainty that my presence in a room mattered, that my preferences were worth stating out loud, that I deserved to take up space. I think I had been carrying Gerald's steadiness alongside my own for so long that when he was gone, I couldn't quite find mine. And Renata understood that, I believe. Not consciously, perhaps, but the way water finds a crack. Daniel worked long hours at his firm downtown. He was a project manager, and he was good at it, and he was tired when he came home. I had raised him to work hard, and I was proud of him. And I also began to understand, slowly, that his tiredness had become a kind of shelter for Renata. When things happened that were unkind, Daniel was not there to see them. When I tried once or twice to mention something small, the parking spot, a comment Renata had made about the way I loaded the dishwasher, Daniel would look pained in a way that made me feel like I was causing him a problem he didn't need. So I stopped mentioning things. The finances came gradually, too. Daniel had taken over managing the household accounts after Gerald passed, at my request. I had never been the one to handle the banking. Gerald had done it, and I had trusted him completely. And when he died, numbers and statements and online portals felt like a foreign country I had no map for. Daniel sat with me and set things up patiently, and I was grateful. I signed the forms he put in front of me. I trusted him the way I had trusted Gerald. I did not pay close enough attention to what I was signing. Over time, I understood that several of my accounts had been reorganized. The joint account Daniel had set up for household expenses, groceries, utilities, repairs had become, in practice, something broader. A car payment for Renata's SUV came out of it. Renata's gym membership. A streaming service bundle I had never heard of. Twice, charges from a home decor store I had never visited. When I asked Daniel about it once, he said they would sort it out at the end of the month. The end of the month came and went, and we did not sort it out. My pension from years of nursing, my RRSP withdrawals, Gerald's life insurance, they had not disappeared, nothing that stark, but they were being used in ways that were not mine. And still I said nothing, because saying something meant conflict, and conflict meant Daniel would look pained, and I could not bear to be the source of my son's pain. Not then, not while I was still so hollowed out from losing Gerald. My 68th birthday was the 3rd of October. I had not expected a party. I am practical about birthdays, and had been since I turned 50. But I had thought, I suppose I had simply assumed, that the day would be acknowledged. That there would be a cake, or a dinner, or at minimum that someone would say the words out loud before noon. Daniel sent me a text at 11:47 inches the morning. Happy birthday, Mom. Busy day. Will call tonight. He did not call. Renata was home all day. I know because I heard her on the phone, heard her moving through the house, smelled her coffee in the kitchen at 2 in the afternoon when I came down to make a sandwich. She did not look up from her laptop. I made my sandwich. I stood at the counter and ate it. I looked out the kitchen window at the backyard where Gerald had built a small pergola the summer before he got sick. The wood had started to gray. That evening, I heard Renata on the phone again and caught the tail end of her conversation before she noticed me. She was laughing a full, easy laugh I had not heard from her in months, and she was talking about a spa weekend. She had apparently booked it for herself and 2 friends. A place in Muskoka, 2 nights, full package. Nice, I thought. Then I went to check my account statement on the tablet Daniel had set up for me. The charge was there. $1,460, dated that morning. She had booked her spa weekend on my birthday, with my money, and had not said a word to me all day. I sat at the small desk in my room, and I did not cry. I want to be clear about that. I had cried for Gerald. I had cried long and hard and honestly, and this was not the same feeling. This was something colder and more precise. It was the feeling of finally seeing the shape of something you had been looking at sideways for 2 years. I thought about what I had signed. I thought about the parking spot and the cast iron pan and Daniel's tired face and all the small, quiet silences I had filled with patience and generosity and the belief that things would even out on their own. I thought about 34 years of night shifts, of holidays worked and vacations skipped, of every paycheck I had put away carefully because Gerald and I had agreed we wanted to be sturdy for our old age. Sturdy, Gerald used to say. We'll be sturdy. And I thought, I am still here. I am still the one who bought this house. Lily knocked on my door just after 9 that evening. She was 16 now, and tall in a way that still surprised me, with Gerald's gray eyes and a serious way of looking at things that I had always privately admired. She sat on the edge of my bed, and she looked at me for a long moment before she spoke. "Grandma," she said, "is this still your house?" It was such a simple question. 4 words, and I felt them settle in my chest like something clicking back into place. "Yes," I said. "It is." She nodded slowly. She didn't say anything else about it. She just reached over and took my hand, and we sat there together for a few minutes in the quiet. Then she said she thought I should talk to someone, a professional, and that her school counselor had once mentioned something about elder financial abuse, and that she had looked it up and there were numbers you could call. I looked at my granddaughter, 16 years old, and she had looked it up. "I know," I said, even though I hadn't known, not in those words. "I think you're right." I did not sleep that night. I lay in Gerald's old side of the bed, and I went through things carefully and honestly in my mind, the way I used to go through patient charts at the start of a shift, systematic. Without flinching, I thought about Daniel, and I tried to separate my love for him, which was complete, and had not changed from my assessment of what he had allowed to happen. Those were 2 different things, I told myself. They did not cancel each other out. I could love my son and still look clearly at what had gone on in this house. By 4 in the morning, I had decided. I got up before anyone else was awake. I dressed in the dark the way I used to when I had early shifts sufficiently, without fuss. I put on the good coat Gerald had given me for our 30th anniversary, charcoal gray wool, the one I saved for things that mattered. I wrote down everything I needed: the name of the bank, the account numbers I had managed to locate, the number for the seniors' financial abuse helpline that Lily had texted me the night before. I drove to the branch on Kingston Road at 8:04 when they opened. The woman at the desk was around 40, unhurried in the way of someone who has seen many things and decided not to be rattled by them. I explained my situation clearly and without apology. I told her I was the account holder, that I had reason to believe charges had been made without my informed consent, and that I needed to understand exactly what had been authorized and by whom. She pulled up the accounts, and she did not look surprised, which told me something. We spent just over 2 hours at that desk. By the time I left, several things had changed. The joint household account had been restructured with new authorization requirements. A secondary card that had been added to one of my accounts — I had not known there was a secondary card — had been canceled. I had spoken briefly with their fraud advisory line and had a reference number and the name of a legal clinic that could advise me on next steps regarding power of attorney documents. I stopped at a Tim Hortons on the way home and ordered a medium coffee and a plain bagel with butter, and I sat at a small table by the window and looked out at the street. An older man walked by with a dog, a retriever with white around its muzzle. A young woman jogged past with earbuds in. A city bus went by with a CN Tower advertisement on its side. I thought, I am 68 years old. I have 30 years of good health left if I am careful and a little lucky. I have a house that is paid for, and a pension I worked every year of my adult life to earn, and a granddaughter who looked up elder financial abuse at 16 years old because she loved me. I have, I thought, everything I need to start being sturdy again. When I got home, Daniel's car was still in the driveway. He had apparently taken the morning off. He was sitting at the kitchen table with his phone and looked up when I came in. He could tell from my face that something had happened. Daniel has always been able to read me. I used to think that was because we were close. I have learned it is simply a particular kind of attention some people pay to those who have power over them. I sat down across from him and I spoke slowly and clearly, the way I had learned to speak in difficult conversations with family members of patients. I told him what I had found on the account statement. I told him what I had done at the bank that morning, I told him that I was not angry, and this was true. I was past angry, but that things were going to change, and that I needed him to understand that clearly. He looked at the table for a long time. When he finally spoke, he said, "I didn't know about the spa booking." I believed him. I believe that still. "But you knew about the other things," I said. He didn't answer, which was its own kind of answer. I did not tell him to leave that day. I want to be clear about that, because it matters. This is not a story about cutting off a son. It is a story about a mother who remembered who she was. I told Daniel that we needed to sit down together, the two of us, without Renata, and go through the accounts properly. That I was going to contact a lawyer about reviewing the documents I had signed. That Renata would need to find her own banking arrangements. And that I needed him, my son, to decide which side of this he was on. Not against his wife, but whether he was willing to see me clearly and be honest. He cried. He is 41 years old, and he sat at my kitchen table and cried the way he cried at Gerald's funeral, with his whole face, not trying to hide it. I put my hand over his. I left it there. That evening I made myself a proper dinner for the first time in longer than I wanted to admit. Chicken thighs with rosemary, roasted potatoes, green beans. I set one place at the kitchen table. I ate slowly, and I listened to the radio, CBC Radio 2, which I had always loved, and somehow stopped listening to over the past 2 years. And outside the kitchen window the backyard was gray and still, and the old pergola looked like it might need painting in the spring, and I thought that was all right. I knew how to do that kind of work. Gerald had taught me. Things did not resolve quickly or neatly. Real things rarely do. Renata and I did not become close. I do not expect we ever will, but she understood, after that week, that the terms of the house had changed. There were no scenes, no dramatic confrontations, just a quiet shift the way water finds a new path when you change the shape of the land. Daniel and I began meeting on Sunday afternoons to go through finances together, slowly, awkwardly at first, but honestly. He told me things I had not known about the pressures of the past 2 years, and I told him things about the way I had been feeling, and neither of us pretended the other thing, the harder thing, hadn't happened. We are working on it. That is the most true thing I can say. Lily still comes and sits with me some evenings. She started asking me about nursing again, what it was like the first time I lost a patient, whether I ever wanted to quit, what I thought about when I was doing night shifts. Big questions, asked simply. I answer them as honestly as I can. Last week, she asked me, "Grandma, were you scared that morning when you went to the bank?" I thought about it honestly. "No," I said. By that point, I'd had enough. She smiled at that. She has Gerald's eyes, and she was smiling at me with them, and I felt, in that moment, the particular peace of being seen by someone who loves you without agenda. I have thought since then about what I would say to someone who is where I was 2 years ago, living quietly in the margins of their own life, accommodating and adjusting, and calling it generosity, when really it is just the habit of making yourself small, so no one has to feel uncomfortable. I would say, you earned your life. You worked for every room in your house, and every dollar in your account, and every year of your retirement. Kindness does not require you to disappear. Love does not ask you to forget your own name. I would say, dignity is not something that can be taken from you. It can only be given away, a little at a time, when we are tired or grieving or simply trying to keep the peace. And I would say, when you are ready to take it back, the way back is quieter than you think. It does not require a fight. It only requires that you wake up one morning, put on your good coat, and go.